already. Thank you for being so many people already online today, and I know we're admitting people as we're starting to talk. We're really excited to be discussing with you today this healthy and sustainable diets roadmap, very first skeleton. I'm going to give the floor to Camila for some proceedings first, and then we'll pass on to Diane Holder, our Managing Director, for an introduction. And then we'll move to the roadmap objectives and the skeleton with our friends from PwC kindly supporting this process as well. So the floor is yours, Camila.
Thank you so much, Emeline. So as Emeline said, thank you all for joining this first consultation of the Healthy and Sustainable Diets Roadmap. In terms of few logistic, we will kindly ask you all to mute yourself unless you're not speaking, and also to put your camera off in order not to have any issues with the connection, in order not to slow down the connection. The session will be recorded, and after the session we will be sharing with you the outcomes of the session together with the slides that we're gonna project and the recording. So if you can go to the next slide, please, Emeline. So this is the antitrust statement. You might be all familiar with that, but this is just for you to remind that we are committed to fully compliance with all laws, regulation, and ethical standards regarding the points that you see highlighted here. So we will avoid any discussion of any of these conversations. So if you go to the next slide, please, Emeline. Thanks a lot. So this is the agenda. We're going to have opening words from Diane. Thank you so much for joining, Diane. And then Emeline will lead you through the introduction to the Healthy and Sustainable Diets Roadmap. We're going to have the PwC team presenting the roadmap skeleton that you have received by email. And then we're going to be working into breakout sessions. Within the breakout sessions, you will have a facilitator from a fresh team and a note taker as well. And during the breakout session, we will be able to make questions either by unmuting yourself or through the chat. And then we will all be back to the main room where the facilitator will report the key 3 points that have been discussed in each breakout session. And then we will conclude with some overarching questions. And here I will be ask you to get ready to use Mentimeter. Don't worry, you will find all the information in the coming slides about how to use Mentimeter, but it's very easy and it's very entertaining. And then we're gonna have some closing words led by Emeline. Thank you, Emeline.
Thank you so much. Great. Diane, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Hello, everybody. It's so great to see you. I think this is a really important conversation because this is an incredibly ambitious piece of work. And it's not only is it ambitious, but it also has to do a really good job of connecting to other things that are happening, because we want this to be bold and have the right ambitious scope. But we also want to be careful that we're not duplicating efforts that are taking place elsewhere. We want to be leveraging the deep strengths and capabilities of others as we think through how do we set out what it is that we as leading companies want to be able to do together. So we're going to talk through that a little bit more today, and we're really, really looking forward to getting your input on this and your continued inspiration as we think through the next steps for this work. One of the really big milestones ahead of us that we know this work is helping us think towards and through is the Global Food Systems Summit of 2021. And one of the leading roles that WBCSD has said that it will play is to help create the space in which we think through what a total commitment action platform could look like for private sector in driving the food system transformation. We've already started working very closely with the UN Food Systems Secretariat for that summit, but we haven't yet started to put the pieces together that will lead us through what a commitment platform might look like, what the business solutions could be, how we lift our leadership voice up through advocacy and in promoting the types of enabling policy that would be most beneficial to a transformed food system, and ensuring that we're looking to the right types of KPIs and targets that are grounded in science. By thinking about our work as a contributor to this bigger space in which we are leaders to set it up with and for others, I think it helps us put the right framing reference around how we want to be thinking about that. And in fact, one of the fresh work streams, the one working on positive nutrition, has already been doing a big piece of this work, creating the gift of how we could look towards the types of nutrition solutions, for example, and commitments that would feed into the roadmap, yes, but equally the commitment action platform that will begin now to take shape through to and through the Global Food Systems Summit. So I think it's great news that it's early enough days that we can have a really design thinking approach to this and use our work here to really help inform, as part of the team, what goes into this broader contribution that we can make. So incredibly exciting, a very important piece of work. I'm really looking forward to being part of the team today as we work through these next steps. So with that, Emmeline and Camilla, I'll hand it back over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Diane. This really helps us understand why this roadmap is happening today and how it's actually really one of the pieces of the further work that we're doing in the BBCSD to try and help our members across food and nature to get to action and transformation ahead of the Global Food Systems Summit. So as said before, now we're going to basically talk about this roadmap. And first of all, talk to you quickly about the objectives and the process to make sure we're all aligned, see if you have any question about this, and then we'll finally deep dive into the content. So please bear with me for a few minutes. So first of all, as Diana was saying, we're building on already existing work. And as all of you know, we published this CEO guide to food system transformation in the end of last year, which sets the 7 key pathways for system transformation of the food system. What is being set out here are the 4 direct pathways, which are transforming agriculture, equitable distribution of value, dietary shifts, and minimizing food loss and waste, and then also enabling pathways. What the roadmap we're doing today aims at doing is really unpacking the pathway number 3 on shifting diets. However, because diets don't come from nowhere, food doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from what is being produced by farmers and then being transformed, manufactured by many of the members in this room. And because food loss and waste is one of the key challenges, as 30% of all of what's being produced or being sold is actually wasted, we can't just look at the diets without really thinking deep as well into how is it going to be produced to make sure we produce what we need to eat, and how we're going to reduce the pressure on the environment by reducing food loss and waste. And that's why you will see later that the skeleton really integrates those different pathways as well. So the focus, the objective is accelerating the delivery of healthy, affordable, and enjoyable diets for all, produced sustainably within planetary boundaries. And we want to try and do this acceleration by answering 4 things. One is articulating a common vision around healthy and sustainable from fork to farm. The second is outlining the most impactful actions in reference to the CEO guide, transformation pathways, and also the SDGs. Then we want to identify KPIs or targets, and I keep this as an open question that we're going to address later on, globally or regionally, that will help you and help everyone actually understand in which direction we're going and where we can make the most impact. And finally, we're looking into presenting smart commitments from members in order to help monitor and report on progress. The focus is going to be, as you can see on the little schematic on the right-hand side here, what the healthy and sustainable diets transformational goal of FRESH has been, which is the positive nutrition of processed foods, the protein question, which includes plant proteins and animal proteins, and finally, the plants, how to increase the diversity of nutrient-rich plants and their intake by people. But keeping in mind, again, the whole food system to make sure we don't come up with crazy ideas and silly ideas of things that need to be eaten that can never be produced. Like I said, this is kindly supported by PwC. And now we're going to soon pass the floor to them. But just before that, the timeline for this roadmap. This is the first consultation we're having with all of you, members of FRESH and a few other members as well. I think we have somebody from Rabobank as a member of SPA and a few others. In parallel of the consultations with the members, we also had a few one-to-ones. We're going to have the next one to really review the full draft in the 16th of June. But in parallel of that, we also are running a series of consultations with advisors. We put together a really exciting advisory group with some of the key leaders in this topic. And so altogether, the aim is to have a last draft by mid-July. And then to really use the rest of the year to work on the commitments bit towards a publication at the end of the year and really leveraging the Nutrition for Growth Summit early next year if it happens, hopefully. So with no further ado, before we go to the skeleton, is there any question on just this, the process and the objectives? Because the content we're going to deep dive into in a second. So you can raise your hands, you can just unmute yourselves and speak up. And if there is no question, that's perfect.
I have one.
Okay. I knew, Gabby, I should have made a bet.
It's like, oh my gosh.
No, it's great. Go ahead, Gabby.
Sorry, but only to make sure we have the correct understanding. This roadmap is only for shifting diets, or this integrate the piece that we are working with Tony related to sustainable intensification and integrating crop, pasture, etc.?
Oh, that's an excellent question, and that's really the core of what we need to nail. So the focus here is, and what the target is for us is really to look at the diet side. However, we couldn't do that in isolation from having a food system approach, because we can't say, for instance, let me take a silly, provocative example. Let's say we need to double the production of plant-based proteins. We need to understand whether we can do that, without destroying the entire resources that we have, for instance. Yeah. Or can we do that because we actually have a capacity to reduce food loss and waste of those same proteins by 50%, and therefore we actually have that capacity. So we thought we can't do that in isolation. And therefore, we are looking at the different also production and food loss and waste and landscapes questions as well. We are actively involving the groups, Tony and Ruth, and we're discussing with Tony actually bringing in more SPA members maybe in this discussion. But the focus of FRESH for implementation later on is definitely going to be on the dietary shifts. And SPA will do their implementation bit on the production, etc. Does that clarify?
Okay, then my understanding is this will encompass everything. However, the focus will be a little bit prioritized related to the shifting diets.
Absolutely. And the implementation for FRESH afterwards to support the members will be only on the consumption side.
Okay.
Can I add one thing with that, Emmeline? Because this has been a hotly discussed issue because scope is so important. And the breadth of what it could be is so big. We want to be sure that we're thinking about on-ramps and off-ramps. So with the work here focusing on healthy and sustainable diets, thinking about how it clicks up to the broader commitment space that we want to be able to contribute the development of for the Global Food System Summit, we want to be thinking about how these pieces connect, but where we scope this specific piece of work. And that's a big part still of the discussion, as Emmeline was saying. So I just thought I would try to restate it in a bit of an additional way and see if that further helps the framing that we're really continuing to work towards.
Okay, thank you. And a subsequent question, and this is the last one, I promise. The COVID will be work that Diane, for instance, is doing. Will this be integrated with this process, or it will be a parallel work process and approach? Thank you.
So thanks, Gabi. And I think as most people know, we've kicked off the COVID response program. One of those projects is on vital supply chains, starting with food system security. And that has 3 pieces of connected work to it. One is the rapid recovery and response. Where are the things that we need to take collective action together because of big disruptions or concerns? We will learn things through that process, not all of which might be implemented by WBCSD, by the way. We might connect that work into other platforms where it makes sense for it to be implemented as a response. But we're going to learn a lot from that piece of work that may inform these projects and how we're thinking about them. Will also inform the second piece of work in the COVID response for the food systems recovery, and that is, how do we think about the recovery blueprint? And this is where the secondee from Bayer, thank you Bayer, is helping us really think that through, along with others, a group of members, on how do we think boldly, building on our CEO guide, for what we need to learn to create a resilient recovery and a preparedness in advance of future pandemic type crises. That will certainly inform our work here. It will also inform Vision 2050 and the longer term impacts. So we're going to be very watchful to not duplicate work, but to find the points of connection, certainly within our own work, to inform and to feed and to improve, but equally in partnership with others.
Thanks a lot for that, Diane. Thank you, Gabby, for clarifying. So I suggest we now move to the skeleton presentation, if that's okay. And then we're going to have some time to really deep dive into some of the questions you may have actually on each of the sections, and then for a global discussion at the end of the webinar. So Samara, the floor is yours. Let me just move to this.
Thank you, Emmeline. So I'm just going to quickly walk you all through the roadmap skeleton. So everyone will have received some pre-reading that Camilla sent through in advance of this call. But for those of you who may not have had a chance to look at it, this is just to give you an overview of what we are hoping to do in the breakout sessions and the kinds of questions that we're hoping to get some insights from you on. So this is just a broad overview of the roadmap skeleton as we have it structured at the moment. So we've broken this down, we've broken the issue down into these 4 key solution areas, which, as Emmeline was describing earlier, are effectively based on the key transformation pathways in the CEO guide, where we can start to think about practical actions and impacts that can be made in terms of transforming diets. So one of them is specifically about this dietary shifts angle to move towards more healthy and sustainable diets. Another on food loss and waste and minimizing that. And then we've got 2 others which are more towards the farm angle. So transforming agriculture while restoring the environment, and then providing landscape solutions. So the way we've listed these solution areas is sort of in that fork to farm approach that that sits behind the FRESH project. And then within each solution area, we've mapped out what we're calling impact areas or opportunities for action under each solution bucket. And then the PDF document that you'll have received prior to this call will then look through what are the specific actions that businesses can start to take under each of these solution and impact areas. So how do we get from the kind of high level, we know what the problem is, to what are the particular actions that we can start to think about implementing at the business or sector level. So what we'd like to do now is to break you all up into groups based on these solution areas, these 4 solution areas, and to deep dive into some of the questions around each solution area. So in each group, what we want you to focus on, and the facilitators will also describe this, are 2 key questions. So one question is to just get your overall views really on the solution areas as a whole. How do these 4 areas that we've used sit with you? Does this seem comprehensive? Are we covering the key issues that we need to as part of this roadmap? And how would you think about sort of prioritization across these key solution areas? So that's more of an overarching discussion of all 4 solution areas. And then within your groups, we also want you to discuss, for the particular solution area that your group is looking at, what are your thoughts on these opportunities for action or these particular actions that we've outlined in the document? If you have the PDF documents in front of you already, that would probably be helpful, but don't worry about it if not, because the facilitators will be walking through those in slides anyway. So the first question is basically this high-level solution areas discussion, and then the next is an opportunities for action or impact at the area of your particular breakout groups. So I'm going to just hand over to Camilla in a moment to divide you up into breakout groups, but just wanted to check first if there were any questions or anything to say in terms of the general structure of the discussion now. So there will be opportunities, of course, to talk through the specifics and the content in the breakout sessions.
Yeah, let's not deep dive into each of the categories, please, because we're going to do that in the breakout session. Just if you have any question regarding the overall structure, maybe.
Yeah, I have a clarifying question for the breakout groups. This is Els. Yeah. Because you asked us to prioritize, whereas you've said in the introduction that this skeleton is broader than the fresh agenda, but taking care of, that we don't do anything stupid in the whole food systems transformation, because that's more what is here. So in our working groups, are we gonna dive into the priorities that we're gonna do as fresh, or that we see as fresh members? Am I correct?
Yeah, I think it would be interesting to get your perspectives both as a fresh member, but also just as a business who cares about this issue. So it can be both broad and specific to the fresh agenda. I think, to your point, I think the healthy and sustainable diet solution area will likely be a priority for many of the people in this group because it is more in line with the fresh focus, but there may be others which people see as sitting slightly outside of fresh, but still a key priority if we're going to achieve what we want to achieve in terms of healthy and sustainable diets. So we've tried to
assign people to their areas of expertise else, and that's a very useful question you asked. So we know there are people in fresh that have been active in food loss and waste. They are going to be moved to the group on food loss and waste.
That's not my question, Emily. I mean, what I mean is, we see it through the lens of what is important for fresh and the other areas that perhaps not are directly fresh, but that we desperately need to make our agenda happen. Because otherwise, I'm a bit afraid we try to say that everything's a priority in the whole food systems transformation.
You're right. Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. Absolutely. Okay, so now, Camilla, you will be assigning people to the different rooms, right? And then we're going to have half an hour for discussion.
Yeah, correct. In a couple of minutes, you will be asked to join the specific breakout room.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Perfect. So now each of the facilitators have 2 minutes and no more to report the main takes back, about their main takes on each of them. So shall we start with the shifting diets to be healthy and sustainable? Who was the facilitator? Don't hide, we have your name.
That's me, Emmeline. Sorry, I was on mute. So hi everyone, this is Emily Grady speaking. And yeah, we had an interesting discussion. I think there are a couple of key points that I'd like to emphasize that came out of our conversation. So one is that I think there's a feeling among the group that these solution areas are correct. There's no way to no one would argue that they're not right. But I think there's a feeling that there's still a lack of clarity around really what are we trying to accomplish with this. So if we were to put a stake in the ground in 6 months' time when we have, or 3 months' time when we really have completed the roadmap, what is it that, how is this different from just sort of reframing existing pieces of work or really setting a vision for what we're accomplishing together? And I think it may be partially related to how we're communicating about it and partially related to how it's currently structured. But I think there's a view that we can do a better job at really kind of making it clear what we as Fresh are accomplishing through this process, and what is it that we want to accomplish to really make a difference in the broader space. So this is some valuable feedback that was shared by, I think, a few people in our group. I'm just looking through my notes as well. There's, I think, the clarity on specifically how we are striving for collective action is also one of the desired, at least clarity up front of what we're looking to achieve. And I think that also relates to a view that there's all sorts of great work that's already ongoing. And how does this ultimately feed into that great work and build off of existing work and progress that's underway? And we spent a bit of time digging into the responsible business pledge and how might that factor into the future of roadmap progress. We only got to spend just a couple of minutes on the impact areas. I think there was a view shared that the impact areas for this solution area are reflective of the current work within FRESH and sort of adequately identify what's happening in our work streams. The biodiversity or agrobiodiversity piece may not be fully reflected and could be called out a bit further. And there's a continued call to make sure that the consumer is seen as a front and center kind of representative of what we're trying to strive for. So how do we bring the consumer along this journey in a meaningful way? So those are just a few takeaways.
Thank you, Emily. It's great. Yeah. It's great. Thank you. This is really, really good. We're taking note, and then of course we'll be deep diving into all of the discussions and really making sure to reflect all of these into the first draft actually of the roadmap. So now should we move to minimizing food loss and waste? It was myself actually. We had a fantastic group, very active. I would just share a few things. So first of all, it was felt that we could merge 2A and 2B. This is really about using better existing techniques and technology already. And also when necessary, investing in technology and innovation, but often you don't necessarily have to do so. You could also already start using better what you have. But in order to do that, you need to add a first step, which is actually measuring and educating your employees and the value chain people in order to really understand which are some of the hotspots and where the improvement can be happening. So at this step of measuring and training people along the value chain. Second, you merge better using what's existing and invest into new technology innovation. And third, also merge the two points 2C and 2D, promoting more transparent marketing and labeling with educating consumers. It's all about changing consumer behavior, but also very much in relation with the food environment and changing the food environment. An important point was to say it's not about transparent labeling, it's about smart and good labeling, and the same goes about marketing. So we had several suggestions, specific suggestions on how to do that, how to educate consumers, where to start, etc. It's not just about educating, it's changing the way we value things. This is also related to the price, the question of price, of course, which relates to one of the issues that FRESH addresses about the true value of food. And last but not least, we said, hey, let's not forget about advocacy and making sure that the government also steps in and helps us achieve our goals. But this is something we're going to cover in one of the general questions later on, which is, do we need a policy bit in every section of the roadmap, or are we going to have a whole policy chapter at the end? So this will be tackled later. I'd say that was the main takes from mine, and if anything was forgotten, it will be gathered back from the recording. Then transforming agriculture while restoring the environment. I guess that would be Tony and David.
Hello, Tony speaking here. So we had a great discussion amongst our group. There was some really clear points provided, which really helped. The main point that we felt was that, similar perhaps to what Emily's group heard, were that, there was nothing on there that wasn't, important and priorities that we were, already looking at as companies. But the importance was about the how, in terms of, if these are particular things that we know we need to do, how do we work together to do that? And how do we build capacity? How do we enable more collaboration? But there are ways in which we can focus that. So some things that were raised, of course, were that even things like technology and gene editing has a role in nutrition and providing more nutritious foods in terms of what's needed. And then also the connection into the markets. So the fact that we need to make sure that there's an understanding of the role of how much farmers are paid for particular products and the equity in the system. So some really good feedback, but I think overall the feeling was that we know what needs to be done and the list is comprehensive. It's really about the how we work together to actually achieve it and contextualize that, of course, to the priorities that FRESH has.
Thanks a lot, Tony. And point taken about the link to the market, which is exactly one of the points of this exercise, by the way. The link.
Just check if David has anything to add.
Oh, just to reinforce, Emily, a real key point is much is already being done, and we're not necessarily good yet about communicating about the already good. And it reminds me of conversations we have in Scaling Positive Agriculture about sort of the demonization of farmers. So, you know, being able to tell a story that's already going on and telling it clearly and connecting it to nutritious food. It's already out there. We can do a better job of communicating about it.
Good point. Really good point. Thank you. Last but not least, on providing landscape solutions.
Yes, Emeline, Alain here. So reporting back, I think we had a few important points that came out from our group, which was slightly destabilized by the fact that this was a bit far from diets, and so more seen as an enabler. And I think the word that came often was enabler, a cross-cutting dimensions, which are probably more how we convert changing diets into nature positive rather than landscape itself. I mean, the landscape wording was a bit confusing. There was the feeling that probably looking at the solution areas 1 and 3 were the most important ones, and 2 and 4 were more enabling, and so important to avoid dilution of our efforts and concentrate on 1 and 3. We also had this idea, and 2 more, I would say, specific dimension. One was that we should avoid duplication, as mentioned by Diane earlier on this meeting, and typically on all the elements about avoiding land conversion, deforestation, making sure that we build upon existing initiatives so as to not duplicate, and how we activate those initiatives and relate to them in the dietary changes that we try to enable. And another thing which was not directly related to that solution area, but it was the absence of things on processing techniques, at least at the granularity of that slide. And that maybe, and because changes in diets, changing in consumers' demand may need changes in processing for our members, and not sure this is properly reflected in the impact areas. And I'll stop here.
Thank you, Alain. Great. A lot of food for thought as well. Excellent. Thank you so much. So I thank you everyone for being so actively involved. Really appreciate this, and this is really rich and will help us to get to the next stage. I think now it's time that we that we go to the overarching discussion. We have 20 minutes left. Please bear with us. Hopefully this is going to be a bit of fun and an interesting discussion. So Camila, do you want to explain people if there is anything to explain about the Mentimeter?
Sure. Thank you, Emeline. Yeah, as said, it's very easy. You can use your phone or you can tap it on your laptop. You just have to go to menti.com and put this code. We're going to have a list of 5 overarching questions, and just 2 of them, we made them via Menti. And one is a multiple choice, and the other one you can just type your inputs. It's an open answer. Thank you, Emily.
No, thank you so much. So if you take your mobile phone, for some of you at least, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be the same on your computer, as soon as you go to mentimeter.com, on the very top, you're being asked for a code to vote. So that's where you should type your code 290122. Okay, and then you can keep it up, and then we're going to move to the questions. So the first question, really, we're trying to get back to the basics of why this roadmap and how can it help you get to your targets, your assignment, your impact, the impact that you have set up for your company. So first of all, keeping in mind how you would like to use the roadmap to inform your business strategy, what do you believe is the best approach to leveraging collective action beyond individual commitments and actions? So it's not for the Mentimeter. This is an open question right now. I've heard from Emily and Tony and others that this was, a constant question here, which is how do we leverage the collective action? And so, do you have some views on this, on how this roadmap can help do that, and therefore help you in your business strategy? You can speak up or type if you have some feedback. To speak up, you have to unmute yourselves.
Okay, then the question here is how, not for the Mentimeter, but how we think we would be using this, right?
Absolutely, Gabby.
Okay, then one piece for us very important would be to ensure farmers understand that we are integrating them, then they can feel part of the solution instead of feeling that we are planning something that they are not part and they will need to implement. Then our key stakeholders would be farmers and the policymakers, then they can understand what we are trying. Then I believe it's more, for our perspective, it's more ensuring we have an alignment and then we can advance together with key stakeholders.
Thank you, Gabby. That's very important. Other views on what's going to be crucial for this roadmap to be meaningful for your business strategy? And to help, and how we can leverage the collective action?
Yeah, I think this else. I think if we can show I would say, I was going to say successful, but that's not what it means. I mean, if we can drive a number of actions as pilot projects, learn from it. They don't necessarily have to be successful. It's great if they are, but if they're not, they're equally valuable to get the learnings in really from how do we drive now the way forward in a more plant-based eating.
Thank you. So basically what you're saying is, and you're taking the example of the more plant-based eating, and we could extrapolate to other areas as well, which is really get into trial and basically do trials together. Hopefully it's gonna work and we can scale up and replicate. And if we don't, at least there will be some learning, but get into action.
Yeah, and I mean in this whole plant, let's say following the scientific direction that Eat Lancet has set, so it has to do with improving the product, the move to more plant protein, sustainable animal protein, and eating more plants as such. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. Any other view? We'll take just maybe two more inputs and then move to the next question.
Hi, this is Jacobine. For me, the roadmap, or whatever we're going to call it, would be very useful if we can articulate big material issues in some way quantified, also show that businesses are the right actors that can do something about it, but also show how this goes together with governmental action and NGOs and academics. And in some way, quantified impacts, maybe number of lives reached or improved, or greenhouse gas emission reduction on a global scale, as we did with the protein pathways. So in some way also show the big opportunity there is for the business and the private sector as good as we can. Because then it provides a canvas and it provides also a collaborative reference that many people would hopefully would like to use.
Thank you. This is great, great feedback. Thank you. A last comment, maybe a last reaction to this collective action before we move to the next question. Yeah.
Can I just say, I think Jacobine has worded it much better than I did, and what I said is part of that indeed. So it's very much aligned.
Thank you, Els. No, I think your point was also complementary to that. The idea of also getting into action and trying together, even if sometimes we fail. So these are two quite good comments. Okay, good. Then let's move to the timely action. This is where you use your Mentimeter right now. So we've had a few discussions with some of you beforehand and also with the advisory group about what would be, what would you find to be the most useful to speed up the implementation of key actions? Would it be that we actually identify KPIs? Would it be that we identify targets? And or would it be that we set up a series of commitments that we basically help your companies commit to a number of targets? So you can choose 1, 2, or 3. Let's just take 30 seconds to see what's your view. Wow, that is excellent. That is really good. Okay, well, there's a clear majority, and it's really good to see that people think that identifying targets is really important. KPIs, commitments is also for quite a number of people found to be important. So that's good. I just want to, as we're talking here about KPIs and targets and commitments, just want to say that we're working with a wider group of food and nature to make sure that we're going to be integrating the work of this roadmap into the wider environment, as Diane was saying at the very beginning. So on the targets, for instance, we're not going to come up with new targets that Fresh invents. We're going to draw on. We're going to draw on the existing targets, and one idea that we have is that we're going to see whether we could be using the targets that the World Benchmarking Alliance will actually be using from 2021 onwards to rank the companies. So we're thinking if we can use those targets, we then give you in prime time a good overview already of those that you will be also judged against in a couple of years. So that's something we're doing, and we have great relations with the World Benchmarking Alliance. Alain talks regularly with them. Diane sits on the advisory board. The commitments, as Diane was saying, we have a bit of commitments that are being developed already for positive nutrition anyways, under the great leadership of Emily, with support from Camilla. So some of you are already preparing this pledge for the Nutrition for Growth Summit on the nutrition piece. We're willing to explore whether we can develop commitments on the wider healthy and sustainable diets piece. And then we would, of course, leave to the rest of the projects and the wider food and nature group, in view of the Food Systems Summit, a potential wider number of commitments across the whole food system, much wider than just healthy and sustainable diets. So we're going to reflect on those numbers. Thank you so much for your vote. And I would suggest, in the interest of saving time, that we move to the next question, if that's okay. Thank you, Camilla. You're doing a great job at juggling rooms and slide decks. Okay, so the trade-offs now. I find this is a tough question, but anyways, let's see whether you have some comments on this. Considering that there are trade-offs between different potential targets, no surprise, how do you suggest addressing these in the roadmap? What do you see as the key trade-offs which need to be considered in developing a consistent set of targets? I don't know, Samra, whether you want to jump in here and explain a bit more what you have in mind? Because I find it quite a tough question.
Yeah, sure, no worries. Yeah, I mean, this question came primarily from the fact that I think all of us on this call would hopefully agree that across the different solution areas covered, there are a lot of really important things that need to happen to move towards healthy and sustainable diets. But in terms of setting particular targets, there are certain trade-offs that inherently need to be made between, say, the social and the environmental, for example. So if you're doing something to support farmers' livelihoods, for example, that may be taking resource which could otherwise go towards an environmental target. So it was just to get a view from you all as fresh members and some of the trade-offs that you probably have to make in your own businesses in terms of how you think about these trade-offs and how you prioritize within different targets that you might set.
Thank you. So are there any views on this?
I agree. This is really a big question. My suggestion is, in fact, go a little bit deeper in that question, but not sure if now because there is so many, and this is so big that I don't even know where to start in order to ensure we are covering it well. But that being said, I believe this is a very important topic that we haven't touched anywhere. Then, Emmeline, my suggestion, I know we are crazy busy with everything, double booked, etc. But if we can think about a moment to discuss this, especially a call related to trade-offs, then we can perhaps target our different areas. And yes, we would need to plan a little bit better this discussion.
Thank you.
Not on us.
No, sure. And by the way, I was asked by some of the facilitators to remind to people that the discussion we had on this skeleton on some of the action areas was a small discussion, and we have had one-to-ones with members before. We will continue to have further discussions at the workstream level. We will potentially also develop a questionnaire that everybody can feed into so that we go more into details. And I guess the same is valid for this trade-offs question as well. So it's not the only interaction and deep diving into all of these issues. Just want to reassure everyone about this. Thank you. Good, then maybe to the next question. Regional versus global. How would you suggest, oops, I've lost the, Camilla, we lost the slide deck. Maybe I'll use mine. Oh, sorry about this. Let me just share my screen here. I'm not sure what happened, but
It's shared, Emily.
Okay, good. So how would you suggest that the roadmap approaches sector level actions and target setting for impacts whose effects are local or regional in nature rather than global? So do you have a view in terms of, because what we tend to do always, and we even did that for the protein pathways document which we published, which was an amazing piece of work. By the way, hats off to Alain for that and the rest of the members. But that looked very much into the global picture and not so much into the regional challenges. But we know that the challenges regionally are going to be extremely different. So do you have views on what the positioning of this roadmap should be? Can it be just global? Does it need to talk about difference in regions? And do you have just a view on how we would do that?
Yes, my 2 cents would be global with some specific cases. And I believe we did a little bit of this in the CEO guide for food system. We brought some practical case. Then if we could keep the global perspective, because relate to trading of goods and workers, there is a lot that in that regard relate to food, right? That are really global. But with specific points related to the local situation would be great, if possible.
Thank you, Gabby. Good suggestion. Other suggestions?
I suggest where we can, we should add the regional perspective. I'm thinking also about diets and nutrition is very different in different regions, as we saw in our Sustainable Healthy Diets white paper of 2 years ago. And we also know that situation on environmental impacts is often regional or national. So I don't think we can avoid to do some regional differentiation. But I agree with Gabi that it's a global, we are a global group, so that's the main thing. But especially in nutrition, I can't see that we wouldn't zoom into different regions, because otherwise it doesn't make sense. Their issues are different, and also perhaps the technologies and the policy interventions will differentiate.
Yeah, and it was one of the major criticisms of the Eat Lancet report when it was published, and that actually it was way too global. And when people were presenting it, for instance, in Africa, it was of course really poorly received when talking about reducing protein consumption, for instance. So point taken, especially on the diet side, that we have to be careful and have some specificity. But of course, we're not going to be able to deep dive into every country. So let's see how we can address this best throughout the document, and maybe also use, as Gabi was proposing, for some specific points, some examples, or maybe some boxes that spell out some of the differences. Does that help you, Samra, and the team, PwC, or do you want us to be even more specific?
Hello, this is Salia from SD. Can I just suggest something?
Of course.
So hello everybody. Sorry, I joined a bit late because of other commitments. Actually, if I get inspiration from our own way of working as companies, you know, the global perspective actually should be used to set them actually what we want to achieve at the end of the day. What is our end game? What do we want to achieve at the end of the day as a target? And then the regional, and I would go even for the local perspectives that are actually going to help us shape the action. The action which is going to help us bring actually deliver the global perspective. And actually, Emeline, what I would suggest is that if I look at the previous bullet points, you have the collective action, timely action, trade-offs. All of this actually they all have finally local or regional color, and they are those and these dimensions are those which are going to give us at the end of the day, when we look at we take a helicopter view, have we finally delivered upon our ambition, upon our vision, or even just upon the overall roadmap that we have, or the overall target that we have set ourselves. This is the way that I would bring it, and I agree with Jacobine, because when you come to very specific issues such as diet, this is so local, so linked to the local places. There, the local perspective is we have to embrace it de facto, so because otherwise we won't be really relevant. Just wanted to make this comment, hoping that it is helpful.
This is very. I think this is very helpful. Absolutely. Thank you. Good. Then just before we finish, another Mentimeter question is, where and how do you believe we should address policy asks in the Healthy and Sustainable Diets Roadmap? Remember that we've been wondering whether we should have policy asks specific to each group, each action area and its category, or whether we should have a policy section. So just if you could vote and see whether you have a view on this, because that's going to help us structure the draft of the roadmap. So basically the question is a subsection under each solution impact area or a separate policy section. I'm not sure I understand the question number 2, reach governments, etc. I would rather say please answer between number 1 and number 3. Yeah, I guess what I write here is, yeah, we can't just have a section. We really need to actively reach out to governments. And that was also highlighted in some of the discussions. Okay. Seems pretty clear that people seem to be in favor of a separate section. But of course, that is very linked to the learnings of the other one. Okay, great. I just see with an eye on the clock, sorry, we're just going to be a couple of minutes late, but no more. The very last question is actually, sorry, I'm losing it. Okay, the very last question is about equity. How do you propose the roadmap should address the issue of equity and fairness in target setting around land use? Samra, do you want to just explain a little bit this question, if you don't mind?
Yeah, this was in relation to one particular point, but it can also be more broad. But one of the things we were thinking about in terms of the targets setting for the roadmap was that you may have issues of equity if, for example, you're trying to limit land expansion in regions traditionally not expanded as considerably as in the West, for example. You may run into issues of equity in comparing, for example, developing countries with the developed world. And there may be other similar kinds of equity or fairness concerns in some of the targets that are set and how they affect people in certain regions or certain demographics differently from others. So I just wondered if anyone had views on that issue.
Yes, then my understanding, this is different than what we said before. This is more specific, very regional, not so different, in fact, but it would be more regional approach, right? Of course, we all know there are under reasons why in a global level, but it's a regional challenge, I believe, if this is what we are trying to understand here in terms of the question.
Yeah, I think it's primarily from a regional perspective that we were thinking about this. So, you know, if you're talking about limiting land expansion, for example, is that fair when quite a lot of the land expansion that has happened in the West happened quite a long time ago?
Yeah.
And that's not the case for certain parts of the developing world.
Agree.
Can I ask, I guess, are businesses comfortable setting targets? It's almost similar to the trade-offs question that may have differential impacts in these ways. So if you set a target around reducing land expansion, which may have a socioeconomic influence for certain people, are you all as businesses sort of comfortable with these equity concerns?
Again, I would say yes, this is not a discussion for 1 minute. I would say the majority of us, we have already things going on in that direction, then it would require a bigger discussion. I believe it's a important discussion, but we need more than 1 minute.
Agree. Okay, so that's one of the questions we're gonna address at a later stage. But let me thank everyone. Still 28 people. We're 5 minutes too late. Thank you so much for your active participation. You've given us a lot of inputs for now to work on the draft document and then start thinking about the target setting and potentially commitments or not. Further discussion needed. We'll get back to you. As Camila said, we'll send you the recording of the webinar, the notes, and then we'll set up further discussions, potentially questionnaires, so we can feed into further thinking. And we'll have another such discussion on the 16th of June. So thanks a lot, everyone. Thank you again to the team. They've done an outstanding job at working on it with the technology and all of that. Yes, and have a good end of the week, and we'll be in touch. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.